Hey everybody, this is Everyday Commentary, and this is another video in the Better Than a Sebenza series. And today we're going to take a look at two different knives. Two very different knives, but both knives I really like. One is obviously the Sebenza, but the other is this knife. This knife is the SOG Terminus XR, which means it has the XR lock, LTE. And this was a knife produced by SOG. I think it's still in production. And what it is it's an upgraded version of their original Terminus XR design. And so what this knife did is it took the liners from the XR design and it replaced them with carbon fiber. And so this actually has not just carbon fiber handle scales, but as you can see, it has carbon fiber liners. And so the rigidity of this knife is coming from the carbon fiber. And it is really rigid. I mean, we're getting no flex whatsoever. The knife weighs just under 2 ounces, and it has a 3-inch blade of S35 VN steel. It has a deep carry over-the-top pocket clip, and it is a flipper. This is not the greatest flipper on the planet. Like, you can pretty easily fail fire this flipper. But it's decent. And one of the things that you got to realize is that the flipper, the pivot is riding on carbon fiber. There's not a whole lot in there other than carbon fiber, which is how they get the knife so light. So it has a little bit of a, how to put this? It feels like it has more traction than, or it's going over a bumpy surface, because it is, than say something that's like bearings on machined steel. But it still flips pretty darn easily. I mean, I'm not using any wrist flick whatsoever. It comes out pretty nice. This knife, I think, is around 130 bucks. And so the question is it better than a Sebenza? And before you start laughing at your computer, let me tell you, this is a lot closer than you would think it is. So for example, I like the clip on the SOG better than I like the Sebenza clip. The Sebenza clip is fine. It's a very good clip, but this is one of the best clips out there. It has perfect spring tension. It stays out of the way all day long, and it really rides deep in your pocket. It is significantly deeper than the knife itself. So when you're carrying this knife, it disappears. Not only because it has a deep carry pocket clip, but because this knife weighs half or just over half what this knife weighs. So this is a really, really interesting knife. Deep carry pocket clip is really good. The weight, as I said, the weight is better. If you get the carbon fiber version from Knife Art, you can cut off like half an ounce, 3/4 of an ounce, but that's still heavier than this knife. And this knife is just a very, very light knife. If you look at it compared to something like the Bug Out, this is around the same weight as a Bug Out with a slightly shorter blade. Not a significantly shorter blade, but it is a very, very light knife. One other thing that I'll point out, which is kind of strange because it is this sliding bar lock design similar to the Axis lock. This knife has absolutely no blade play up and down or side to side. SOG dialed this knife in perfectly. So this is a really, really solid locking up knife. Now, does it lock up like a Sebenza? No. Is there anything in the production world that locks up like a Sebenza? No. But if we're talking about the strength of the lock, I don't care. If we're talking about how solid the lockup is, these are about the same. Now, this has that like extra bank vaulty feel, which I think is a really important part of the Sebenza allure. But I don't think it's something that provides measurable performance benefits. So in terms of lockup by performance, these guys are about the same. Another thing that I think is really interesting about this knife in comparison to the Sebenza is look at this. This blade is taller, but they are virtually the same blade shape. Now, there is a little clip point here because SOG just likes its clip points, but if you were to delete, say, when I use my very dirty, like that, these knives have almost identical blade shapes. And so, as good as this blade is really good too. It's a great blade shape. It's got a good long bit of straightaway. It's got a nice belly. It does a bunch of things really well, just like the Sebenza. So there's that. I think that the thumb studs on this knife are equally bad to a Sebenza. The Sebenza's thumb studs get a lot of criticism because they're pointy, but I actually like them quite a bit. If you know how to use them, your fingers never get sore. But these thumb studs are also not super great. They're not the best in the world, but really this is a flipper knife. A couple things that I don't like about this knife that I like better about the Sebenza is, as you can see, this knife has a blade coating, and blade coatings suck. Like, they universally suck, and I don't know why people do them, especially on knife steels like this. This is S35VN. This knife steel is not going to rust. You do not need a blade coating, and if you think your knife looks cooler with a blade coating, just use it for 5 seconds, and then it looks like you dropped it at the garbage dump. So blade coatings suck. And this knife has a blade coating that, as you can see, just does nothing other than collect damage and wear. The Sebenza, on the other hand, has this absolutely gorgeous stone wash that does nothing but rebuff damage and wear. So in that sense, I like the Sebenza's blade finish much better than I like the SOG Terminus XR's blade finish. Overall, I think you could do a whole lot worse than a SOG Terminus XR LTE. This is a really great production knife. One of my favorite knives on the market, and one of my favorite knives to recommend to people who are getting into EDC. It is nice enough that it will be a useful and obvious upgrade from something like a gas station knife, but it is not so expensive that you're going to have to like skip a paycheck. So, which of these knives is better? Obviously, if you're going price blind, I still like the Sebenza, but if you're factoring in the price, this is a much closer comparison. This is a really, really good knife. And so I'm not comfortable saying that the Sebenza, when you factor in price, is better than the SOG Terminus XR LTE. So I'm going to call this one a draw when you factor in price. Now, if you're buying a Sebenza, you're not really concerned about price. And if you're buying a Sebenza, you're probably an enthusiast. This is not a knife an enthusiast will like better than this knife. I like the Sebenza better. But if we're talking about what you would recommend to somebody who does not have the hellbent enthusiast mindset, I don't think that you're going to have a clear winner. And I think this one is going to be the one you recommend more. So I'm going to call it a draw, but boy, is that an interesting comparison.